I wanted to take a minute right at the start and acknowledge that UBC Vancouver is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And I also want to acknowledge that many of you are joining us today from different places and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. And something I want to add is that in this program, we really dive into this. We don't want to just simply acknowledge that we're situated on the unceded territory of the Musqueam people, but we want to really be critical about that, acknowledge the importance of Indigenous sovereignty, land stewardship, and knowledge and meaningful climate action. So we've worked to integrate these themes through the curriculum of the program and to continue asking these questions and reflect on our positionality and its importance to how we approach climate action planning. So beyond this acknowledgement, I wanted to make it clear that this is something that we continue to learn together on as we proceed through the course curriculum, through the program curriculum. Here's our agenda for today. We will introduce the instructors of the program. We'll give you the overview of the program and the curriculum, and then we'll leave plenty of time for you to ask your questions because we figure that is why you're here today, and that's really what we want to make time for.
Sorry, quick interruption. Sorry, I can't see the slides yet. Oliver, I'm not sure if they were able to be shared on your end.
I see them here in front of me. Thanks.
Yeah, I can see them actually. This is Eric. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, if you're all seeing them, then that's perfect. Go forward.
Okay, please, participants, feel free to comment in the chat if you're having any issues with it. But thanks for checking, Kate. Wanted to give you a sense of who we are, there's others who are behind the curriculum and the program as well. But here are the main instructors for the program. It's myself. Hi, I'm Sarah Elder. I'm an adjunct professor at UBC's Institute for Resources, Environment, and Sustainability. I'm also a senior policy advisor with the International Institute for Sustainable Development, which is a Canadian think tank that works on global sustainability issues. And I have in the past worked with the climate action team at BC's Ministry of Agriculture, specifically on climate action on farms in BC. So I'm excited to be the program director and an instructor for part one of this program, which we'll get into later. I'll hand it over to John Madden to introduce himself.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Great to be with all of you today, and really happy to be with my esteemed colleagues here. So my name's John Madden. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Engineering within Campus and Community Planning. I also am adjunct professor in the School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture, teaching high performance buildings. I have a career in terms of sustainability and climate action planning. I spent 10 years with the City of Vancouver in the major projects group, developing plans and policies, including the Sustainable Southeast Falls Creek Olympic Village project, as well as working in the Middle East, developing regulatory policy and sustainability policy around green buildings for major projects in the Middle East, and have come back to Vancouver. I had the experience working in the private and nonprofit sectors. And again, great to be with you to share what we're going to be doing through the course of today. Over to Eric.
Yeah, hi there, folks. My name is Eric Mazzi, and as you can see in the little short caption, I mean, my background is formally is mechanical engineering and also, say, energy and environmental policy. I'm sort of a part-time academic. I do have been a full-time in the past, and I'm currently an adjunct with the New York Institute of Technology energy management program based in Vancouver. But I'm mostly a practitioner working with utilities, individual municipalities and other various clients, helping with more on the greenhouse gas mitigation side, like greenhouse gas reduction, greenhouse gas management, are really what I specialize in. I specialize more in the demand side of systems, so that would be on the customer side of an electric or gas meter for ranging from residential homes, commercial buildings, industrial plants. I also very much value education. So I do a lot of educational things. So I'm, have gained some experience teaching professional certification courses, for example, undergraduate sustainability courses at UBC. So I've done my best to adapt to working with individuals who have a wide range of backgrounds, ranging from trade tickets to degrees in psychology and social work, of course, engineers and science and business people, people with high school diplomas as their most advanced formal education even. And every, what I've come to appreciate is that people from a wide variety of backgrounds, disciplines, levels of formal training, we need everybody to solve the challenge of sustainability, especially for climate. So that's a bit on my background. Thanks.
So you'll see that we've really tried to compose a team that has experience. We have our academic experience, but then we work in policy and practice with a wide range of organizations and have experience outside of the university as well. And we really wanted to make this a program that is useful to you. So that's really where we're coming from in our approach to the program. We wanted to get also a better sense of who you are, what your interests are, what your motivations are for considering this program. And so we have a little poll that we wanted to put up to get a better sense. So Kate here is just switching it up to this Mentimeter tool. You can use your phone to scan this QR code here, and it should take you to a web page where you can use this code at the top of the screen here that you can see. If you plug that code in, then you'll see this question that you can answer, and we'll be able to see everyone's responses anonymously on the screen, which is kind of fun. And what we really would like to know in terms of this, what interests you, it's like, what would you like to get out of this program? Why are you considering it? What would be the value to you? What do you want to take away from it? And we really see this session also as like a two-way, we have the curriculum for the program, but we're able to then ensure that it really best fits the needs of those who are registered for the program, those who are considering it. So we're starting to see some of the interests from those in the call with us today. Now I see really these pieces of having the knowledge, having that holistic understanding, but paired with the practical actions and the, sounds like being ready to do something about it beyond just knowing about it. So let's just give another minute to get a few more responses in. See also the funding. That's definitely the financial side is another aspect that we're covering. Innovation, action. That's great. Thanks for participating. That gives us a much, better sense of what your motivation would be for taking the program. And then we're also curious to know what sector are you from? So we provided a few options. There we can see right now, some of you in private sector, some in not-for-profit. The program's really designed to be suitable across the range of different sectors. And that's part of the value, is that there will be, we'll speak later about live sessions that will allow learners also enrolled in the program to learn from each other as well as the instructors from a variety of perspectives. Yeah, that's great. We have got a variety of people, which is really great for being able to learn from a variety of different perspectives. Thanks everyone for participating in that. We'll share the screen again, and I'll give you a bit of a program overview so you can get a better sense of what the program looks like in practice. So as you've probably seen, we've scheduled the program for the inaugural session to run starting in September. It'll be every Wednesday evening from 6:30 to 8 p.m. for 10 weeks in a row. We'll have these 3 parts of the program. So it's divided into these 3 parts. The first part, Foundations, is the first 4 weeks, and then another 4 weeks on financial management and strategy, and then 2 further weeks on implementation and climate action, case studies, and application. The fees are $1,950 for the program, and there are a number of possible funding opportunities, which, depending on your eligibility, you may be able to access in order to fund your participation in the program. I will say the Stronger BC Future Skills Grant, which is available to most people in BC, we will find out more about this with a government announcement in the next 2 weeks, we hope. So that will be something that if you did register ahead, you would be reimbursed once you became eligible for that and were able to then gain access to that Stronger BC Future Skills Grant. So I encourage you to look at the links that we've shared in the chat and explore that to see if you're able to cover some of your participation in the program. And a bit more about what the program looks like, how we deliver the program. It's all online. Each week there's a number of resources so we have an online platform that you gain access to that walks you through the course curriculum. So you would be able to then complete what we've asked, different readings, different videos to watch, different podcasts. We try to vary it so that you have a number of resources where you learn the content of that week's topic that we're covering. And then we have a 90-minute live session on those Wednesday evenings where we come together as a group and the instructors facilitate interactive discussions. We cover some of the materials. There's an opportunity to do different activities, learning activities, ask any questions that you may have had based on the content that you reviewed that week leading up to the session. We expect that you should be committing around 5 hours a week to complete all of these activities. So that's all of the kind of pre-session material that we've assigned, and then attending the session. So that 1.5-hour live session is included in the 5-hour estimate. So then an additional 3.5 hours doing your assignments, doing your readings, and that type of thing. So a total of 50 hours for the whole program. And then a bit about how you are assessed. and then I'll go over a bit more about the actual content of what we're covering. But just to give you a sense is we would have 3 assignments, and the idea is to make them practical, where you're applying the content that we've covered in the program to your own interests, projects, climate action mandates of your organization, your community, your company. So we aim to make these helpful to actually apply what you've learned in the program and apply it to your own mandate that you're thinking about from your organization or company. And then the assessment is kind of competency-based, so we would also be very clear, this is what we're looking for, this is where there's improvement needed, or this is where you've met expectations, and we would provide instructor feedback to you on those assignments so that you would get that as additional value to inform how you'd move forward with that. And participants will then get a virtual badge for completion from UBC, that then you could use this in your signature lines, display it on LinkedIn, and it shows that you've completed the program. So as you can see from who's here today, we've really designed this program to be practical for policymakers, like city, municipal planners, companies and industry, private sector players, also community organizations. So if you know that you are either interested in or need to have a climate action plan, and you want to have more knowledge, more skills, more access to, we aim to provide resources and toolkits and other practical resources that can then advance you in this journey towards having a climate action plan, then this program is for you. You don't have to have a background in climate change. We will cover the basics so that you can then articulate the case for a climate action plan to your colleagues, in your climate action plan to your audience. You don't have to have a background in climate change. So this is a bit more about, as I mentioned, the 3 parts. So the first part is on this foundations piece. So this is where we will give you the core concepts of climate science, climate change. So you'll be able to understand the causes of climate change and the consequences. And we'll delve in a bit into the justice aspects as well. And then you'll also be able to develop an understanding of adaptation and mitigation. Additionally, so this is where I saw that some of you had mentioned what you really wanted to understand were the different, scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, GHG inventories, how they're assessed, their utility. These are things that we would get into in this part of the program. And then we would also cover key elements of climate action planning so that you could get a better understanding of the policy context, how to plan for the planning process, what are the components of a climate action plan, some best practices around that. And again, throughout, we pull through a justice and equity lens so that we don't forget about that piece when we're looking at some of the other pieces. And then part 2, this is where we get into the financial management and strategy. And so we look at understanding mitigation opportunities. We look also at combining climate resiliency and mitigation. So assessing design options for climate exposed infrastructure as an example. Then we also get into costing methods and understanding what are the limits of climate action business cases? How can you build a strong business case for climate action planning in organizations. That will allow you to critically evaluate some of the limitations and then also strengthen your case and your climate action plan. And then part 3, we'll dive into some case studies and some implementation. And so this is where we'll go into the case of climate action planning at UBC to pull out some learnings from the experience that we've had at UBC so that you can really start to think about climate action planning in a really oriented. I mean, we'll cover case studies throughout the program, but here we dig in a little deeper to the case of UBC and pull out some aspects that then can be transferred to your own cases, including how to design engagement strategies and processes so that you can get that support for your climate action plan and for its implementation, and learning from some of the barriers and challenges to addressing climate action and how to really support those major capital projects that can help you achieve your goals. So I think on that, that's a brief overview. Please ask all your questions when we get to the question section. But before we do that, I wanted to hand it over to John Madden, who's been instrumental and really working to lead the climate action planning process at UBC. So he can speak a bit more to that and how we'll bring that into the program for you.
Thanks, Sarah. As Sarah mentioned, we're going to build upon part 1 and 2 in terms of taking the learnings, the knowledge, the experiences, and apply them and ground them to real world case studies. And the case studies that we're going to use, as Sarah mentioned, are UBC's Climate Action Plan 2030, as well as our recently approved Neighborhood Climate Action Plan. And both of these plans are really ambitious in both their breadth and scope, but they're also utilizing UBC as a campus as a living laboratory to really show innovative solutions, approaches, and processes to actually designing a plan that is effective, that has impact, and that has the desired results in terms of its plan intent. We also take the learnings through the process. Plans are typically very dynamic, and they need to have sustained life for their implementation. And I think one of the things that, again, as we kind of saw the interests of the different participants that are wanting to learn about this program, is that it really does address all those different facets, from policy formulation, from really thinking about what are the gaps, the barriers, the challenges associated with taking climate action in your organization. What are the opportunities that exist on the horizon? What are the big impact areas based on benchmarking your organization, your institution, if you're in municipal government? Where are the strategic areas of impact that you can really address the kind of scarce resources? Because we're all working within scarcity, limited resources. And so where can we have the biggest impact in terms of the deployment of those resources to advance climate action? We're also going to utilize the kind of fundamental steps, as Sarah mentioned, of what it takes to scope a climate action plan. We often call it the plan for the plan, or N-1 planning. So really understanding the kind of key stakeholders that are involved. Who are the decision makers? What is the landscape in terms of political dimensions within your organization that will have an influence in terms of how to frame the climate action and build support for it? How do you design an engagement strategy that has a deep reach to many different stakeholders and really getting to where they are at to help inform your climate action plan. And as Sarah also mentioned, we'll delve into the business case development, whether that's on a project basis or a program basis, to really understand what are the capital costs, what are the financing costs, what are the operation and maintenance costs that go into it. And on the benefit side, really understanding what are the kind of potential savings, whether that's utility savings, material savings through circularity, and also thinking about other aspects that are less financial, but nevertheless really important to quantify or qualify through the benefits lens. So that could be reputation and brand, attraction of retention and attraction of talent, of resources, of developing a greater business development in terms of potential customers that will be attracted because of your leadership and your innovation that you're taking to climate action. So whether you're at the start of the journey in developing a brand new climate action and how to kind of go about that process in terms of planning for the plan, or you're well on the way in your journey, you have an existing climate action plan where you're really struggling to think about innovative ways to implement it, this program is really designed to help support you no matter where you are on your journey. So I'll pass it back to Sarah. Yeah.
We also know from your participation in the Mentimeter earlier that, practical action and having some, knowledge and skills and understanding of how you can advance climate action planning, in practical terms is important. And I wanted to invite Eric Mazzi to speak a bit more about, why we feel that this would be useful for this program.
Yeah, so I'll be facilitating, it's micro course 2, I guess, or the second part, which will focus on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions mainly from facilities, reporting, how to integrate, we'll call it resiliency, which can be thought of as adaptation as well as mitigation. A bit of overview of costing and some different approaches to costing. And as Sarah mentioned, and really John as well, what are the limitations of costing? So it's pretty basic. And if you haven't done it, you can readily learn, all of you, I'm sure, how to do standard net present value analysis, for example. And we'll cover those basics in a short amount of time. But there's limitations to that. So for example, one common misconception that I've observed is that in some people have the expectation that a climate action plan is going to have a positive profit out of it, a positive net present value based on all the assumptions that's wrapped in. And I know from experience that sometimes that happens. Sometimes you get the win-win, not always. And however, which John has already mentioned as well, if you take whatever your role is, if you can appreciate some of the complete value of these climate action plans, doing resiliency measures, let's say building envelopes can save energy and provide an adaptation measure. If you lose power in a facility, you can keep operating to various levels of service for a longer time with less energy stored or whatever you have for backup. I mean, there's all sorts of sometimes less quantifiable, but perhaps they're quantifiable with effort. These additional things that can be valued. Things that many of us will have heard of. Indoor air quality, resiliency in the event of lost power. So we'll touch upon those and really how to synergize climate action plans, especially on mitigation. The best practice approach, which is pretty well known, I think, but not always practiced, is how to synergize, let's say, a facility plan, whether that's whatever. It could be buildings in a municipality, like I work with the city of Edmonton, for example, or healthcare facilities, or an individual's home, or an industrial plant. But I mean, there's a plan for that infrastructure where certain, let's say, key equipment would need to be replaced anyway. And so we'll emphasize what is usually well known, but just for best practice, how to, let's say, synergize a greenhouse gas reduction plan so that when equipment would normally need to be replaced, you can replace it with a low carbon option. And so that incremental cost drops a lot. Whereas if you have, let's say, a new piece of equipment and you say, well, we're going to replace that with some low carbon, I mean, the business case for that is a much tougher sell. And those I'll call them intangibles, but I like to think of them as with deliberate effort and attention to these other attributes that are valuable. If we call attention to it, you know, we can value them. I mean, they become easier to sell as well. Municipalities commonly have to go to their city council members to vote, right? You know, various facilities, you know, have boards that oversee, and they need to approve plans, or senior management in an organization. So anyway, that's really what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, I do want to say also, just while I have the floor a little bit, you know, we're really strategizing to get the most out of these 10 weeks. So as Sarah said, there's 10 weeks, as you've probably seen on the site. So every Wednesday night for 10 weeks, and they're not all consecutive. I think there's a 1 week break in there. I can't remember, but there'll be 1.5 hour live session. The live sessions are not absolutely mandatory, but obviously to get the best value for your time and money, we want you to be there during those live sessions, 1.5 hours per week. And then the expectation is about 3.5 more hours per week on average, for these various assignments that Sarah mentioned. So I just want to highlight some of the, well, for one, we recognize there's a limitation to what we can achieve in 10 weeks. So I just want to say that. But at the same time, you know, I'm pretty confident that with the approach we're taking, we're going to help those who attend, you know, get the most value out of it. And that's because there's a lot of effort being put into prepping these materials. This information session today to gather some information on what folks would be looking for who are taking the course. We already have a decent list of registrants who are registered, and we're looking at the backgrounds that we can find on those folks about what they want out of the course. And we'll have a certain ability to do some adapting along the way. I want to mention that. So Sarah will lead off and cover the first 4 weeks. I'm personally planning to attend, as a bare minimum, session 1 and 4, and probably all 4 sessions. But if for some reason I can't make a Wednesday night, but you know, I want to be able to be part of the first 4 weeks so that I can more naturally roll in and be effective as we transition and cover the next 4 weeks, which would be my responsibility to lead that. And then it'll be handed over to John for the last 2 weeks. So I wanted to share a little bit about the course logistics. While we're really doing tremendous efforts, so Stefan Story, who's part of the session right now, you'll be able to ask him questions. He's the lead person preparing all the material that I'll cover, and we're long-term colleagues. We work together well. I mean, there's a lot of effort being put into the material to get not a blast of an exhaustive list of resources that can be of limited usefulness because it could be so big, but a very good strategic list of resources, for example, on mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency, costing, and so on. So there's a lot of time and effort being put into preparing the materials that will be covered in the course. So yeah, I just wanted to share some of that perspective on the logistics, the amount of prep we're putting in, making the efforts to the extent feasible. We want to adapt it and make it useful for every single person who takes it, while we recognize that there's a limit to what we can collectively achieve in 10 weeks at 1.5 hours live session and a few hours additional. So those are some of my thoughts, and if you think it works for you, great.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad you highlighted that, yeah, the work that's gone into it on our website too, which we'll share in the chat. You can see a list of all the different people and organizations that we consulted also in the development of the curriculum for the program. And like Eric said as well, there's others who won't be the facilitators for the program, but that are experts in this and have really been integrated into the design of the curriculum. So we've really put a lot of work and thought into it. And as Eric mentioned, it's only 10 weeks, but what we really wanted to focus on is giving you the knowledge, the skills, and the tools to put climate action planning into practice wherever you are in that journey, as John mentioned. So the idea is to give you the important concepts that can be broadly applied, familiarity with the tools of analysis used in climate action, so then you can go and you know where those tools are, and you can go back to those tools as they're useful to you and apply those as they make sense for you. Understanding of some of the key processes at different scales, and really getting you to know where the resources are. So on Indigenous climate action strategies, on resources for, engagement strategies for, so that we provide you access to all of these resources. And Stefan Story, who's on the call, has really put a lot of work into, we'll give you like a practitioner library in the course content that's there for you also to refer to, so that you have those and you don't need to go looking for them yourselves. So we really want to set you up so you can kind of hit the ground running, continue running, and direct your path to where you want to go in terms of climate action planning in your organization or company. And I'll echo that the live sessions are not mandatory, but really we're designing them to be engaging, so that that's where you really feel like you're part of a group. You get to network with your colleagues who are also in the program, interested, sharing their experiences. And we've designed it to be interactive as opposed to simply sitting and having a lecture. So I should say, that said, same goes for the info session. We've given you a lot of info, but we wanted to get your questions from you. Please feel free to use the question in the chat, put your question in the chat, raise your hand, and we can also call on you and you can ask your question, but please feel free to ask whatever is on your mind. If there's something you want to know before deciding whether to register or not, whether the program's right for you, we're happy to answer. Any burning questions? I see some coming in, so I'm just going to check here. I see a question here about whether we have placement, and I'm not quite sure. We do still have room for registrants in the program, but if I misunderstood the question, feel free to elaborate on that, direct message to me so that I know how to answer it best to give you the details that you need. And I see this, another question is, as an advisor on energy, without necessarily having, it's more on the background. So as I understand it, I have a question here that's, if you don't have previous experience with climate action planning, is this appropriate for you? Yes, this is what we've designed the program to be inclusive of those who do not have prior knowledge in climate change even. So really We want to give you the foundations of understanding climate science in order to then have also the key components and resources to be able to advance in climate action planning. And if you're really early in your journey with climate science, then we can also provide additional resources. So we often have kind of core resources to cover that week, readings, videos, etc. And then we have additional resources that if you want to develop your knowledge further in this aspect, we can also direct you to those resources. And
Yeah, I
colleagues,
just
feel free
wanted
to
to
chime in.
chime in a little bit and say, I assume, each of us really in general we have a role in, let's call it climate action, because that's what we're talking about. And that role can be, there's a wide range of roles. Not all of us are writing climate action plans, but you might have a role in implementing something, or maybe you're a senior manager and you have some subordinates who are doing the writing and the implementing, or maybe you're a frontline person and you just have a little piece of it. I mean, it's still valuable. I'm of the opinion the basics of climate science is essential knowledge just to be a citizen, let alone someone who identifies as your profession, I guess, how we make a living and pay our bills through something related to climate action. And the other, so, I think certainly certainly my intent is to appreciate that not everybody's writing the plans and has some big key central role, although some of you might, but you just have a piece of it, or you aspire to get there. Or I encourage folks to think ahead, like I do for myself, like where might I be in a few years? I might find myself in a position where I have the opportunity or someone expects me to take a key role in writing something related to a resiliency plan or a climate or mitigation plan for whatever it might be, some set of buildings or infrastructure. So, I encourage you to think that way, because I think that's how the approach we're taking. It's useful from a variety of roles, and not assuming that all of us have, this key leading role to play. Some of you might, and even if you don't see yourself there, I encourage you to think ahead, like what do you aspire to do, and where might those opportunities be in the future? Because sometimes I know from my own career, some of these things happen unexpectedly and maybe faster than you think, where it's like, oh, I have this opportunity to do this. Now I have to deliver. Where am I going to get resources? Yeah, so that's something I encourage you to do. Yeah, to keep in mind.
Thanks, Eric. There's another question I think you could speak to that's how does the course cater to the private engineering, consulting, and business solutions focus of big agencies like transit companies, airports, and ports?
Yeah, I see in the Q&A. Yeah, in our I think it's in our outline. I was just like, we're definitely taking more of a Western Canada, BC and Alberta context. I think I actually saw that in one of our drafts. And so, yeah, we definitely have some resources on funding, and which is part of the question there. Hopefully they're helpful to you, Maureen, with your question there. I know for my own background, I've done a lot of work in the US, obviously British Columbia, where I'm based, and also Alberta. Like I've done a number of things, and I continue to work I already mentioned, for example, with the city of Edmonton. I am a registered engineer in Alberta, for whatever that's worth, and can offer some perspective on Alberta, not as much as somebody who's works and lives there full time or works in climate action. But again, from my perspective, many of the knowledge and tools and case studies we're going to cover have a fair degree of generalizability, long word, to other contexts, to other situations. So just some of the things that, for example, John will talk about at UBC, I would say are very similar to what might be able to be done in Alberta. I'm also keenly aware that the funding resources for operations, I'll say, in Alberta is much more limited than, let's say, other contexts because of the policies over the past few years since the shift from you know, the NDP and so on, when they had Efficiency Alberta and some more funding through that organization that more or less got decommissioned. So yeah, that's my best answer there, Maureen. Good question.
Absolutely. And I'll add too that, you know, if you do have really specific questions and you feel like you want even more information, at the end, I'll be putting up a slide with my email and you're welcome to contact us and we'll also be able to elaborate further as well. I think Eric covered that piece on, there was a question on, you know, will this be focused more on BC context or will it also apply also to the Alberta context? There's another question about using, will we be using case studies from all over the world or looking primarily at examples from North America? We will touch on, you know, I don't think we can talk about climate change and climate science without also talking about the global impacts and consequences of climate change. So we will be touching on that. We have tried to pull most of the case studies and examples from the North American context, assuming that most learners will be joining us from that context and interested in those examples for informing their work. But that's something that please feel free to chime in the chat if that's something that, you know, if you're joining from outside North America and that's something that you would be interested in as different examples, then we're open to hearing about that. Similar, there's a question about whether we'll talk about the legality of climate action planning and how to implement through governments. We did have in mind that people would be joining who are working in municipal governments. And so we definitely have had that audience in mind as we've been designing the curriculum to consider that those will be pieces of interest to you as you work on climate action planning. So that's something else. Anything that Eric or John, you wanted to add on that and case studies and applicability to governments?
Yeah, just adding and maybe reflecting on Maureen's question, which is such a good one about, you know, we work in different political environments that has major influence in how we even approach climate action planning. And so sometimes even the framing of what we are doing might not necessarily fall under the title of climate action plan. It might be a critical infrastructure assessment and understanding the impacts associated with climate change events on critical infrastructure that has influence on the continuity of business, you know, and those disruptions. What is the cost of doing nothing? What does it mean in terms of insurance premiums when we're considering the implications of these climate change events? So really kind of thinking holistically about the frame that we put to climate action planning, and the political environment in which we work is not always the same. And I think that's really important because it isn't a monotonous, or sorry, the similar political environment, and we have to kind of respond appropriately within that frame. I think the other thing too is we have to distinguish between resources and funding. Resourcing is what we bring to bear through the approach of allocation or reallocation of resources. That could be people resources. That could be how we think about the application of time variables in approaching things, how we phase different projects or programs for that matter, versus financial instruments can be everything from, you know, leveraging senior government funding or philanthropic sources of funding, or it could be financial mechanisms that you actually deploy within your organization, creative measures like internal carbon pricing that is used as part of your business case development that understands the implications associated with what is the cost of not implementing that project or program. Green bonds and kind of leveraging private sector funding and financing. Even financing itself. Financial institutions are now starting to think about stranded assets in how they lend money such that it's not contributing or exacerbating the situation around climate change events that further kind of create this vicious cycle. So there's a lot of different lenses to apply to what we think about resourcing and financing and funding, and all the different instruments that we can bring to those different programs and projects.
Yeah, and I just want to answer, there's a question by Pete that came up in the chat, and others may have a similar question. First, I'll mention, I did put my email in the chat for everyone, mcs@telus.net. If you folks think of a question afterwards, feel free to email me. I'll do my best. So Pete's question is, how does this course maybe cater to for private engineering consultant that focus on big agencies like transit companies and so on? I would say engineering consultants and even broader resource or sustainability consultants, I would say, yeah, it definitely should provide value. I mean, a lot of what I do is considered engineering consulting, so I can definitely resonate with that. And I think definitely yes, because whether your role is, let's say, part of a big organization. So years ago, I was an employee in maintenance at UBC, right? I think it was 8,000 employee, 1,000-acre campus, right? Lots of its own infrastructure, its own city, essentially. So I've been wearing that hat in my career. I've been in the consultant wearing that hat. Many of the same considerations are important. Like if you need to design an effective climate action plan that has the mitigation, let's say resiliency measures that are actually have the best chance of being effective, right, at reducing greenhouse gases, saving utility bill costs, improving a facilities, for example, or other infrastructure resiliency to some of these events like wildfires, loss of power, potential floods, high winds, and so on. You want to have it effective, but you also need to kind of, we're all at one time or another in a position where we need to sell that plan to somebody. So my point is, if you're a consultant, you might be selling it to a client who has some contacts, or you're part of an organization, you need to sell it to your boss. You need to sell it to your subordinates. That's at least my experience, is that we're all in a position of having to maybe convince others to buy in to a set of plans, which represents an investment of resources, time and money and other things. So I guess that's my best answer, Pete, is that, yeah, I definitely think this would be useful for consultants, engineering and otherwise, for those reasons I just laid out. Yeah.
Thanks, Eric. There's another question. Oh, I see, Mohammed, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon. So sorry, I jumped the call like late, and I hope that will be recording at the end of this one. However, my question is on the same comment that Eric put regarding the benefit to consultant. And since consultant or engineering firm will be selling the idea, let's say, or get the buy-in from the end users, in my position here, I work for the end user, actually. It's an industrial facility. How can I add value to my employer, to my industrial facility by attending this course?
Well, good question, Mohammed. I mean, I feel personally I'm very well positioned to have something to contribute to industrial, because one of my roles I've been I'm still I was an employee in BC Hydro's industrial engineering team full-time for 3 years before I took a faculty job at UBC for 5 years in the Masters of Engineering Clean Energy. And then I've been part-time in the same team. So I've done a lot of work with industrial operations in British Columbia and a handful in Alberta. Having said that, I mean, the main content of the course is really more structured case studies towards buildings. I mean, UBC has some significant infrastructure that would be considered industrial, such as a district energy plant, really 2 district energy plants, the bioresource plant and the gas boiler plant. So anyway, I guess if industrial is your perspective, I'm certainly feel pretty confident I could help with that. Until probably the last several years, I pretty much disavowed myself as being a buildings expert, but I've done quite a lot of work on buildings in the past, probably 8-10 years, that I no longer set that limitation on myself because I consider myself primarily an industrial person. So, my short answer, yeah, I can definitely offer some extra things if it comes to that, and answer specific questions that may come up around industrial, so.
That's great.
Thanks.
We had one, I'm mindful of the time, so we'll wrap up here, but we had one further question on whether the program would touch base on climate resiliency. Yes, we will touch on that in the first section of the program. That will definitely be part of our conversation around climate science, causes and consequences, mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency is right in there as well. If there are other questions, please, like I said, do not hesitate to reach out. I've put my email in the chat, but I'll add it right now again in case you didn't get that. sarah.noh.elder@ubc.ca, and Eric's provided his as well, but please don't hesitate to reach out. We're really happy to answer your questions directly. We want you to feel like if you're registering, this is because it's a good fit for you. And so we're happy to help you navigate that to decide whether or not to sign up. And we're really excited about this program. We've been working hard on it. And the thing that really makes it come to life is having, you in the program where we can then have a back and forth. And of course, we've prepared the materials, but we're also learning and adapting and ensuring that it's really relevant to everyone who's in the program. So thank you for taking your time to be with us here today. We really enjoy having you. And as I said, don't hesitate to let us know if you have further questions or want more information.